Tonight, we return to something hidden, not lost, not destroyed, but buried on purpose. There are many stories in the lands between. Stories of gods of war, of ambition and ruin. Stories of those who sought power, and those who were broken by it. But some stories are not meant to survive. Some are erased, not because they were weak, but because they were too dangerous to remember. This is one of those stories. The story of Messmer, not a hero, not a king, not even a name spoken in the light, but a flame, a living flame, cast into darkness long before the tarnished rose, before the shattering fractured the world, before the Erdtree itself began to waver. There existed a hidden war, a war that history does not record, a war that grace does not acknowledge, a war that even the gods chose to forget. And at its center stood a single figure, Messmer the Impaler. He was not like the other demigods, not like Radon, who held back the stars, not like Melania, whose blade knew no equal, not like Rani, who turned her back on destiny. Messmer was something else, something inconvenient, because where the Golden Order stood for control, for structure, for divine perfection, Messmer represented something it could not contain. Fire, not the gentle warmth of life, not the guiding light of grace, but destruction, the kind that does not discriminate, the kind that does not obey, the kind that spreads. From the moment he came into existence, Messmer was already a problem. If he was truly born of Queen Marika, then he was proof that even a god could create something unstable, and instability has no place in a perfect order. So instead of celebrating him, instead of raising him among the other demigods, he was sent away, not as punishment, not as exile, but as something far more calculated. He was given a purpose, a role that only he could fulfill, because there were lands beyond the reach of the Erdtree, places where grace did not shine, where faith in the Golden Order did not exist, places that remembered older truths, and those places could not be allowed to remain. Messmer was sent there, not to rule, not to guide, but to erase. And so began a war without witnesses. The land he entered was not defenseless. It was not weak. It was alive, filled with people who believed in something different, something ancient, something that did not bow to the Erdtree. To them, Messmer was not a savior. He was a curse. The sky itself seemed to change when he arrived. The air grew heavy, the light dimmed, and then came the fire, not in a sudden burst, not in a single moment, but slowly, creeping across the land like a living thing. Villages burned in silence. Forests turned to blackened skeletons. Rivers dried beneath the heat. And those who resisted met a fate far worse than death, because Messmer did not simply kill. He marked Long spears, cruel and unyielding, would pierce through bodies, lifting them from the ground, immobile, helpless, and then the flame would come, not fast, not merciful, but patient, consuming everything, piece by piece, until nothing remained. And when it was over, there would be no grave, no memory, no trace, only ash. This was Messmer's purpose, to ensure that what once existed would never exist again. And for a time, he fulfilled that purpose perfectly. The land began to fall silent. Resistance faded. Hope disappeared. Everything was working exactly as intended. But something unexpected began to happen. Messmer began to think. At first, it was small, a quiet question buried beneath obedience. Why was he here, while others remained in the lands between? Why was his role so different? Why did his power feel like a curse instead of a blessing? These thoughts did not make him stop. He continued his task, continued the burning, continued the war. But the questions remained, and over time, they grew louder, because with every village reduced to ash, with every life erased, Messmer began to understand something. This war was not meant to be won. It was meant to be forgotten. The land itself would never be reclaimed. The people would never be remembered. And Messmer would never be called back. He was not a conqueror. He was a solution, a way to remove a problem quietly, completely, permanently. And once the task was done, there would be no need for him to exist. That realization changed everything, because for the first time, Messmer saw himself clearly, not as a son, not as a warrior, not even as a demigod, but as a tool, a disposable one. And yet, despite that, he continued, because what else could he do? The flame within him did not allow hesitation. It demanded action. It demanded destruction. It demanded purpose. And so he obeyed, until one day there was nothing left. No villages, no resistance, no voices, only ash. The war was over. Messmer had fulfilled his role. And so he waited for something, anything, to follow, a message, a command, a sign that he had been seen. But nothing came. No grace, no guidance, no acknowledgement, only silence, endless, suffocating silence. Days passed, then years, and still nothing. The realization returned, stronger this time. He had not been sent to win. He had been sent to vanish. The land was his prison, the silence his sentence, and the flame his only companion. But even that began to change, because fire, when left unchecked, does not remain stable. It grows, it twists, it becomes something else. And within Messmer, that transformation began. The flame was no longer just a weapon. It became a reflection of everything he felt: abandonment, confusion, anger. It burned hotter, darker, less like something given by the Earth Tree, and more like something taken from elsewhere, something older, something that did not care about order. His body began to change with it, subtle at first, then undeniable. His presence became heavier, his aura suffocating, as if the world itself recognized that he no longer belonged. And still, he remained, because there was nowhere else to go. No path back, no grace to guide him. Only ash, only silence, only flame. And then something shifted, not outside, but within. A thought, clearer than anything before. If he was to be forgotten, then he would choose what that meant. If his existence was to be erased, then he would decide how. The flame surged, not in rage, not in chaos, but in clarity. For the first time, Messmer was not acting on command. He was choosing, and that choice changed the nature of his fire. It was no longer just destruction. It became identity, a mark that could not be ignored, a presence that could not be denied, even if the world refused to remember him. The scars he left behind would remain, and so Messmer the Impaler became something more. Not a servant, not a weapon, but a force, one that existed outside the Golden Order, outside grace, outside memory itself, and somewhere far beyond ash and silence. The truth remained hidden, a truth about Marika, about her children, about the things she chose to bury, because Messmer was not the only secret. He was simply the one that burned the brightest, and perhaps that is why he had to be erased. But even now, even after everything, even after the silence, you are here, listening, remembering, and in doing so, you bring him back, not as he was, not as a tool, but as something else, a question, a doubt, at the heart of the Golden Order. Because if a god can abandon her own child, if a demigod can be erased from history, if an entire war can be hidden from the world, then what else has been forgotten, and how much of what remains is truly the truth? The flame still burns, not in the open, not in the light, but beneath it, waiting, quiet, patient, unforgotten, even now, even as you drift closer to sleep. The story lingers, soft, distant, like embers in the dark, and somewhere in a land of ash, Messmer still waits,